Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick and the first part to the spin-off of What If DARYL Died Instead of Merle. But before we get into that, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button so that you can help me make this channel bigger, better, and have much better stories for the future, especially with all the new perks, memberships, and additions added to this new chapter in the Omniverse of Nick. Once you get that all out of the way, we can dive in to today's episode. So, the spinoff, for those of not familiar, if I didn't spoil that enough whenever I did, the spinoff takes place in place of The Ones Who Live with Merle and Beta. It is titled Dixon'S Whispers, Merle versus Beta, covering the end of the story, which we wrapped up last time. We remembered DARYL Dixon, his sacrifice, his memory, and everything that he was worth in the story leading up to Merle's true redemption and what he meant, and talked about Merle and how much he has done and did in the course of the story. And we ended with Merle going on the hunt for Beta, who, unbeknownst to any of them, had been forcibly taken by Jadis/Anne to the CRM because they both had nothing and literally Jadis threatened his life. So that ends the recap, and we're getting into part 1 of 3 with the spinoff. We get into the CRM's introduction, and Jadis integrating herself into the CRM along with Beta. But even after getting the CRM outfit, seeing a little what the CRM has to offer and everything, Beta's still thinking about that plan to use the CRM as his own horde or to just get away. And this solidifies it based off what he sees and the fact that anyone who comes here can't leave. Jadis/Anne tries to talk to him and says that this is a monumental opportunity and that Beta should be happy here. She could have just killed him right at that junkyard when she had the chance for killing her people. She could have literally given herself nothing. But this didn't just work out for her. This can work out for Beta too. He can become a higher up soldier. They can change the course of the world and actually get something working here, and mentions the 500-year plan with the CRM. But Beta is far from interested and says that he only went along with her because she threatened his life, and that don't expect him to get comfortable here because he is far from willing to be a part of this charade. And that night, while he's sleeping, he dreams. He dreams of his past, who he was in that building. And he dreams of Alpha helping him discover who he is, helping Alpha to take down Hera and the likes of the Whisperers, being Alpha integrated as the leader. And from that point on, who they became after, Alpha and Beta, the solidifying leaders of the Whisperer army, and what they did, built, and conquered, and how all of it melted away the second that Alpha was slain by those people at that community, the Hilltop, and all of what led to this very moment. And Beta makes up his mind. While the CRM might not be able to be taken by him like those other two communities, he still plans to get out of here, build his own horde, and get his revenge. And with that, he gets his mask, which he still has, and tries twice to get away. But, like Rick, even though Beta is taller, stronger, and kind of more honestly intelligent at many levels than Rick, he just can't get away from the CRM. Soon enough, he hears and meets General Major Beale, or Major General Beale, however you want to frickin' say that, and learns a little more about the CRM, but doesn't care. He continues his escapes. And once he gets to attempt number 3, this is the point where it would be Rick escaping, and it's Beta now, whenever Rick threw his bag with his stuff onto the boat. But what does Beta throw? Well, we obviously know. He throws his mask onto the boat, just as a solidifying factor to try and get away. But Okafor and several soldiers halt his efforts. And there's no message in a bottle since Beta has no one to get back to. So Beta just throws his mask on the boat. Okafor sees Beta a lot differently than how he saw Rick. He sees Beta as, number 1, a very big threat, and number 2, a solidifying, very impressive, possibly general in place of Beale, because he doesn't see him just as a soldier. He sees him as beyond a leader, but he does have to confiscate his knives and give Beta the general kill stick after attempt number 3. And then Beta meets the likes of Thorn and learns a little about Okafor, the bombs, and more about the CRM. Okafor tries to get Beta to understand the CRM and what he's doing, the escape attempts, and how he looks at Beta. Only a little bit of how Okafor feels, but these pleas and details fall on deaf ears. Then we get to attempt number 4, whenever everyone, including Rick and Cannon, were taken out in the middle of the woods with the red lights, and they were all on leashes. But with Beta, I'll get to that in a minute. Beta is given a long machete, and I'm talking this would be a huge machete because Beta's a huge man. So naturally, this would be a great weapon for him. Once Beta's leash is pulled on by the CRM soldier, he's not going to cut off his arm. Beta is not truly that. He's desperate, but not family desperate. So when he's tugged on, this only makes Beta angry. So, with how big, strong, and overpowered Beta is, especially in this story, he yanks the leash back and tackles the soldier to the ground. But several others surround him, and unfortunately, Beta is tased and brought in. So while Beta did put up an immense fight, the CRM is just too much on the advantage for Beta to get away, even here. Even though Beta's done a lot better than Rick. Soon enough, we see Beta on the walls, triumphing Rick's and Michonne's kill streak on the walls, against the rules, mind you, but hey, this only makes the people there fear and, praise Beta, but he doesn't care. Soon enough, Esteban is brought in, but Beta cares even less for him than Rick did, so honestly, it doesn't matter. And then Major General Beale talks to him more, and this officially grounds their meeting. And now, Beta with the casual CRM outfit is only a tiny bit more interested in what all this means. Why does it matter? What does this place mean to the world, and why should he care for it? And Major General Beale says, because he and the world need the CRM. And mentions more on the 500-year plan and how much the CRM truly means and how they've been to change the world, and how much Beta, even he, General Beale, sees Beta even earlier than when he said it to Rick as the next replacement of the army, as the main leader. He doesn't see him just as a soldier. He sees him beyond a leader. But Beta just smirks at this, half faking the whole leader thing, because he doesn't care still. All he cares about is now this is giving him incentive to want to get away more, because he knows that he's feared and praised, but he doesn't care. Esteban is talked to by Beta next to get away, And Esteban doesn't really want to cooperate here, not only because of his life now or his place, but because he is scared of Beta. But Beta says that he does not wish to kill him or anyone here. Not yet, he says to himself. All he cares about is getting away, and he will spare Esteban's life when this is all over. While this is going on, Thorn talks to Beta more about the management, the rules, the planning, and what's her goal and what she thinks of Beta. And she sees a true leader in him more than just a soldier too, and can't understand why Beta would throw all of that away to get away and just have his heart blanketed by all this darkness and to be around corpses that could just usurp the world. But Beta says that he doesn't care about anything here or what it's worth. If there's anything that's worth anything here, it's to help him get away. And he shoos Pearl away. And soon enough, we get an epic shot of Beta wearing CRM clothing, which would be awesome. Once we get to that attempt number 5 and that stupid girl behind the walkers who Rick had to save, Beta is far angrier when this happens, because now he had gotten so much closer to getting out of this stupid community and to get his plan finally fulfilled, and this girl ruined it, and he's ready to just kill her. But then his mind flashes to Lydia and how much Alpha cared for her, and the two of them, and he thinks about the Whisperers again. And this stops Beta from killing her, and it leads to him actually saving her. Once they're back at the base, Thorn is very confused by this, because now she doesn't see a crazed man with his heart blanketed by darkness and wanting to surround himself with the dead. He just saved a girl's life. And Beta says that it's because of an old relic of his past that haunted him in that moment, and it was nothing to do with the girl's life. He just couldn't bring himself away from that thought, and to not get too ahead of herself thinking that he's with them. That night, Beta attacks and interrogates Okafor, but it's not about knowing who he is or his family or anything like that. It's the fact that he is being kept here and completely halted, and that he doesn't want to be a soldier or a leader. He wishes to go his own path, to follow his own leads of the walkers and usurp the world for himself. And when Okafor kicks him, Beta's not going to take that like Rick. He pulls through and slams Okafor into the wall, which they're at. But Okafor and his smart military thinking, this only hinders him for a second. When Beta goes to assault him again, he rolls out of the way and aims a gun at Beta at gunpoint so that he thinks that Beta can't move. But Beta doesn't attack. He just smirks smugly at this, saying that, "Go on, shoot me. I have nothing to lose. And I thought you saw me as a leader." But Okafor says he's not going to, because he does see Beta as a leader and beyond. And Beta throwing all of that away to just be surrounded by the dead, that's exactly what got him in this mess in the first place. And that it honestly is just annoying to him in many levels, because why should Beta want to surround himself with the dead when he can be with a community that can make the world how it was before even better? Everyone are his people, everyone alive. Basically half of what he told Rick. But Beta says that he is not a part of everyone anymore. This is his choice and the world that he chose. And he doesn't understand how he is pertained to all this information that doesn't concern him. And he doesn't expect Okafor to understand, someone who's not lost near of what he did. But then Okafor mentions the bombings of Atlanta and Los Angeles, killing his wife and almost doing the same to Philadelphia. But Beta is not deterred like Rick because he doesn't understand how this information matters to him. True, now he knows a lot more, but he doesn't care enough to really divulge the way he's thinking. He's only tiny got the CRM into his mind. But even Rick at this point was not into CRM stature until he was on the copter with Okafor. And he says that the reason that he blanketed himself from the world was to hide who he was and keep his true purpose. And now he doesn't care. Okafor says that he should care because the world can be better if Beta helps. Beta, honestly, he expected that the likes of Jadis/Anne or someone in the world would have killed him already for how much of a threat he is. But people have chosen to keep him alive, seeing how much of help he could be. Why would Beta want to squander that talent? Even if he's trying to hide his identity and all this, he could be worth so much more. Beta, he just wants to ignore this, but he sits for a second, thinking about all this, taking it in, and finally listens and accepts all this and says that he will agree to be a part of this CRM and this crazy charade on one condition. He gets to keep his 2 blades. He gets to not be targeted or assaulted by soldiers anymore or watched on the daily double. The kill streak is taken off of his record permanently, and he gets to be a high officer. He will not demand leadership, but a high officer, and gets to command whoever he wants on missions and to actually work on this. Okafor says that this is a tall order, but honestly, considering how much Okafor saw for Rick, he would see double, triple, quadruple that for Beta, and everyone would too. And considering that Beta's actually negotiating here, it actually means a lot. He's not asking for leadership, he's asking to be a high-up soldier. Beta says those are his terms, and Okafor should be lucky that the likes of him are accepting anything that this community has at all. But if Okafor don't agree, he'll just go back to square freaking one. But Okafor, he agrees with this. And with this, they have a deal. Beta is integrated into the CRM personally. With his giant machete still at his side, the casual CRM weapon, and both of his blades even more upgraded into the CRM level. So now, Beta is a full-on CRM soldier, one of the highest up besides Okafor and Thorn, right almost next to Major General Beale. And then we show them in the helicopter, with Beta piloting it almost better than Rick. And Okafor saying that he's really proud of where Beta came. And honestly, this will go even more long ways to possibly that 500-year plan being lessened. But then he is shot by a mysterious assailant, and their copter is blown up, with the soldiers being attacked by a missile. Then, when Beta is thrown to the ground, he gets straight back up and jumps back up to a sword being lashed in his direction, which he combats back with his giant machete. He then power throws the assailant straight to the ground because, unlike Rick, he is not going to take any kind of attack. We know Beta, so he isn't going to take this lightly. And then, once he's thrown the assailant to the ground, he looks at the assailant and, with shock in his eyes, recognizes him. Merle Dixon stares up at the soldier, very terrified, and honestly, kind of recognizing who this might be, and how strong this guy is in this armor. But then, the guy in the armor responds, Beta, saying, well, to think that I forgot about you. That was a mistake. and throws the helmet to the ground, and Merle should have known. The very person that he came to find, he ran into like this. How was Merle's journey with the likes of, say, Nat and those people different than Michonne's? Or was it almost exactly the same? And what will lead into the second part of this spin-off? And how did you guys like this first add-on to an awesome 3-parter spin-off to our story? See you guys next time. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
I carry within me the pride of a bullshit.
Welcome, guys, to the Omniverse of Nick, and part 2 of 3 of Dixon's Whispers, Merle versus Beta, the spin-off to What If Daryl Died Instead of Merle. Now, before we begin the second part, make sure to smash that freaking like button and subscribe to the channel so you can make this channel and help me make this channel bigger, better, and get more awesome stories pumping out and all that good stuff. Once you guys take care of all that and look at membership and all that stuff, we will get into today's video. Now, in the last one, we covered Merle confronting Beta in a very, very out of place way. Well, not out of place if you've seen The Ones Who Live. And now we're gonna get into how Merle got here. So, he meets the people that Michonne did in the end of season 10, or, you know, that episode. Meets with Nat, the whole group which they were at. Except with Merle, he's not looking for any family. He's looking for a man who could be a threat to a community in which he's from. So his reasons for going and where he is and everything is going to be different correlating whenever he's talking to Nat and everybody else. Nat and everyone, unlike being friendly here, they're still friendly with Merle, but Nat calls out that his reasons now, especially going out, are extremely freaking stupid. Because this guy sounds like he was a very big deal. But we all know how Nat was in wanting to help, and the fact that Merle says he could be a threat, so he decides to help, along with the people that do. So, we get that scene with all of them together going, and the CRM's introduction and gassing everyone, which results in the deaths of everyone except Merle and Nat. Because I'm not gonna literally kill Merle off here. If Michonne could survive the gas, Merle could too. It's just literally that simple, especially if he's lived this long. Merle doesn't know if it's worth it at this point to go after him, but Nat says if he's got to take care of this and he's gotten this far with so many hints and everything and seeing the mask and learning more about the Whisperers, he says now he believes in the fact that he's gonna help Merle see this through and make sure that their communities and everything stay safe. Merle is definitely perked up at the fact that Nat has this much confidence that they can still do this and everything. And he really is liking Nat. Soon enough, they get better, and Merle asks if Nat still wants to go through with this, because Beta's not going to be a pushover when they find him. And now they got the CRM on their tail. But Nat says they're seeing this through, and if he can't live through it, he'll help Merle see this through. Then we get to them shooting down the helicopter, and Nat more or less staying behind and asking what he should do with, like, if Merle has trouble with the soldiers that they just shot down the helicopter from, or if Beta is either with them or, like, tries to use them or is just nearby. But Merle says whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that Nat is there to back him up if need be. But he's confident in taking the soldiers down. But once Nat sees Merle overpowered by Beta and his introduction, how giant he is and what he looks like, Nat's like, no, I'm helping, and shoots a rocket right whenever Beta reveals himself, throws down the helmet, you know, the end of the last episode. But Beta knew that Merle came with someone and anticipated some kind of attack. So he throws his knife in response, or one of them, and that officially blows up the rocket, which throws Nat back. Doesn't injure him, but it does throw him back. And now, suffice to say, Nat's peeing his pants right now. Because, yeah, no ordinary man can do this. And now, Beta clutches his giant machete given to him by the CRM, and now he's looking to take out Nat. But then, he is shot in the back by Merle, and, yeah, Merle was just thrown for a loop and thrown down. He wasn't injured, so of course he'd still be able to fight. And now Beta is officially angry. He's finally gotten the chance to get his revenge on at least one of the people who made him this way. Soon enough, a helicopter shows up, and Beta devilishly side-eyes and grins at this, because he tells Merle that if these two are gonna cause him this much trouble and take out the soldiers he's with, oh, if they think he is bad now and that he's got worse than when they last crossed paths, his people that he's with, they ain't gonna live past them. But Merle says that's not going to happen and throws a smoke grenade, which gives Merle and Nat time to escape. And now Beta is utterly furious, but before he can unleash his fury more by either going after them or attacking someone or something, he realizes that Merle had something that belonged to him. Once Thorn and soldiers approach and everything, they demand to know what happened, Thorn most of all. Beta recognizes that Merle had his mask, the one he threw on that boat, which means he tracked him here. Beta tells the likes of Thorn that he has been tracked here by an old foe from his past, and that he was merely trying to get him out of the way and finally get his revenge, and notice that that guy had his mask, and that they're either going to find them or they need to go after them. Thorn says whatever the case may be, they'd best go back to base first, because they already lost a decent few soldiers and Okafor. So whenever they get back to base, Jadis is waiting for Beta. And Jadis is very surprised to see Beta truly in the fold of the CRM, despite having heard of everything. And honestly, very unrecognizable to the Beta that she came here with. And jokingly and tauntingly asks, "Don't tell me you're still looking to try and get away, are you?" But Beta doesn't have time for Jadis's mind games and brushes them aside like tissue paper, because he tells Jadis that the people that made him do all that killing and how he ended up at that junkyard where she was, one of them, Merle Dixon, is caught onto his trail. He tracked him all the way here. And he knows why and how he got here and how he was able to track him. He doesn't know much about Merle Dixon. All he knows is that him, a man named Rick Grimes, and a girl named Andrea, they all are the ones who made him how and who he is today. And he knows how Merle got here. It's because of his mask that was on that boat that he threw. But he does plan to get rid of him once and for all. Jadis asks, how does he plan to do that? Because, number one, if Merle tracked him all the way here, that means that they could find the CRM and bring that whole group washing down upon them. And even though the CRM has more than the numbers capable of such an event, and Jadis is not, messed up on the fact of, being involved with anyone, since she wasn't, besides her own people. She does know, though, that the responsibility of Beta, as well as her safe keeping herself in the CRM, falls on her shoulders. So, them waiting to do a move isn't going to work. She tells Beta to send a team out because he wanted this rule to stay with the CRM. And if he's truly endeared to the cause, and that's one of his old enemies, he's better see to this personally, or it will affect them both and everyone here. Beta says that even though this isn't his calling, it's a choice. He says that he plans to eradicate Merle and anyone else that came with him. And then we'll see where it goes to from there. And with that, they make a plan. Meanwhile, Merle and Nat are recovering from the beating and attack that they were just given at a cabin some ways away from where they were. Nat asks, what are they going to do now? But Merle can't respond. He just can't believe it. The man that he was searching for, the threat of their community, and the guy whose mask was on that boat, he found with the guys who gassed them. He's working with them now? He honestly didn't expect this, but Beta is even more powerful than ever. And this is very, very bad. And he tells Nat this, and that Beta is not the threat that he was before. He's even worse. No wonder he was taken by surprise and beaten in the fight. But to be fair, he was caught off guard because he didn't know it was Beta. But now, Merle has a plan. What they gotta do is, they gotta sneak attack more carefully and appropriately this time, because they know, he knows, that now Beta will tell this group, the CRM, of Merle and Alexandria and all the communities, which means they're gonna have their hands full. And Nat says, what does he mean by that? And what's Merle's plan here? And Merle says it's simple. They can't risk Beta with this new group finding the communities and destroying them and gassing them. Because if they could barely survive and it killed everyone else, imagine the destruction. They've got to deal with this. And even though they are outnumbered, and Merle was taken down somewhat by Beta, they can beat him and lower the chances, so that way if the CRM is to attack or not attack at all, this is honestly what they have to do. So they're going to find a location in which they can anticipate the CRM will find them at, and take out Beta and anyone else they can and save the communities from destruction. And Nat says it's a freaking foolishly dangerous plan, but he likes it. And with that, they set off. From the cabin in which they're at, which was a ways from the location in which they were at, they go to a remote wasteland, which is in the middle of it all. So, whenever they get there, they prepare themselves to ambush whatever and whoever is there. That being Beta, Thorn, and several CRM soldiers. And they're just travailing through. They're not looking here for good. And Thorn asks, they're just in the middle of all of this. What makes Beta so sure that Merle won't be ready this time with other people rather than just that one little short dude that Beta saw? But Beta says Merle made a stupid decision not coming here with others. He probably wanted to do this alone. And he smirks at this, saying, It's rather foolish, and it will be his last mistake. But while he is monologuing and being him, all of a sudden, every one of them hear the word "now" screamed out of nowhere. But before any of them can process what's happening, an explosion rings out, and it blows up all, if not close to all, of the soldiers and catches everyone else by surprise, giving Merle and Nat the perfect opening advantage to begin their assault on Beta and the CRM. But how will it go? Will Merle actually be able to take out Beta with Nat being alive and not being killed immediately like before? Will they be able to save the communities from certain destruction? And if they do manage to at least win or halt proceedings, what will happen after? Or is this all for nothing? Find out next time in the final part to this 3-parter spin-off of Merle and Beta. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.
Now it's time. Get out!
Welcome everyone to the Omniverse of Nick and part 3 of 3 with Dixon's Whispers, Merle vs. Beta, the finale to the spin-off of What If DARYL Died Instead of Merle. Now, before we begin, be sure to smash that like button on this video and subscribe to the Omniverse of Nick so you can help me make this channel bigger, better, and even more cool with stories and etc. But now, today's gonna be big for this finale, so you're not going to want to miss this. But let's dive in. We have just gotten into Merle and Nat, who were planning to stage an assault, surprise assault on the CRM. Once they get there, Merle and Nat finally opening and attack, with Merle leading it on. But that doesn't stop Beta, for even if the soldiers are attacked and killed, it doesn't stop Beta from going straight after Merle and power tackling him into a boulder. A slash is then reciprocated by Merle, but it's not a victorious slash for once. This slash with his sword hand is caught by Beta, knowing all too well about Merle's sword hand at this point. And sword in hand, he grabs Merle, now aiming towards his upper arm, and slams him over his shoulder onto the ground. Nat tries to help with his missile launcher, but gets fatally shot in the heart by Thorn. Merle, seeing this, recovering from the slam to the ground and to the boulder, mind you, angrily shouts in fury and sadness because Nat actually lived canonically a little bit longer here, so even Merle knowing him, it's sad. And he grabs his gun, turns his attention away from Beta, and fatally kills Thorn. So she dies pretty much kinda a little earlier than she did. And now we're about to get something really cool. Beta with his huge machete versus Merle with his sword hand. Merle, even though he was caught off guard for a second, is able to get a very good kick into Beta's stomach. And then we get a clash of weapons. Merle's sword hand and Beta's giant machete. This would be an amazing battle and would most likely, if not definitely, be the highlight of this spin-off. But Merle's sword hand is caught by Beta again. And Beta, even angrier than before, fueling up with energy and rage, is finally getting fuel within him to get his revenge, and angrily tells Merle that his life isn't the only thing that he's losing today, along with Beta getting his revenge. And to show his point, Holding the sword hand still, with all his might, Beta snaps Merle's sword hand with his bare hands. And then sucker punches Merle square in the face. But Merle, staggering a little bit, clutches his crossbow in hand. And with this in hand, shoots Beta square in the eye with an arrow, right in his left eye. Now, Beta pulled out 2 knives like a champ in his canonical time, but this is a 10 times and like 20, 30 times stronger Beta. So a crossbow to the eye would immensely hurt, but he would definitely be able to power through this. But Merle doesn't stop. He clutches a shotgun now in hand and shoots Beta square in the stomach. Now feeling fueled with energy over Nat's death and wanting to get rid of Beta once and for all, he runs forward fueled with energy and goes in to punch Beta square in the face and prepare to end his life. But when he goes for the punch, Beta catches it, surprising Merle immensely. Beta, now with a scarred, closed up, bloody running down eye, fueled by nothing more than rage, utter rage, tells Merle that he just made his last mistake. And with this, he reaches into Merle's vest, grabs his mask, which he knew that Merle had, remember, and fatally stabs Merle square in the chest. Now, supposedly, this kills him, but Beta knows that he's not done. And Beta doesn't want to be done with Merle. So, undecidedly at this moment, the screen just cuts off from this intervention. Sort of like you would see in the show. But now we cut to Beta having his mask back after forever. The old him is to come back, seemingly, but it's not. Beta is no longer the same that he was over 7 years ago. Actually, it would be kind of less than that, since it's not whenever he wasn't kidnapped at the same time Rick was. So, technically, it's been a little less, it may be close to, but point is, this isn't the same Beta, so now the mask is just a relic of the past Beta can use to the CRM's true advantage. Once Beta returns alone to base, the true monument for Okafor with Major Beale and the sword are shown to us fully and completely. But Beale is more upset now, because it's not just Okafor that's been lost. Thorn has died too, and he's still alive, along with a good amount of soldiers. So Beale talks to Beta alone. And as proud as he is that Beta's come full circle and Merle has been dealt with, he knows that there's still cost to come with this. They're still not out of hot water just yet. Beta, still bloodily scarred and blood running down his left eye, no more usage of it obviously, is still truly at 100% and tells Major Beale, or asks him, what's to be done now? And Major Beale says that that should be obvious. The threat that Beta deemed a threat, that tracked him down after all the escape attempts and everything, shows that Beta was still willing to fight for the CRM. So he's asking him to fight for it again by destroying the communities that Merle Dixon came from, to show his true allegiance to the CRM. Afterwards, Jadis confronts Beta and once again says how surprised she is by his change. At the beginning, she would have never have expected him to become a forefront to being the possible next replacement for Beale in her eyes, and Thorn's and Okafor's, but a high general commander of the army and killing the likes of the guy who made him come here and do all this. It's a big step. But she asks him, what does Beale want now? And what's to be done? Beta says that he too never would have expected himself to join with this army, but it's his new calling. It cost him his pride, his eye, his ultimate who he was, and now the mask that he carries is a relic of the past. But he got his half revenge, but it's only an inkling as to what he cared about before. Now he cares about serving the army his way, and he is told by Beale to Jadis and everyone else to gather every article and soldier that they can to show his true allegiance to the army. They're going to wipe out every community that Merle Dixon came from. Not only will this satisfy Beta's old thirst and quest for revenge, but it will make sure that the CRM's safety and security is truly and utterly secure. And Jadis wholeheartedly agrees to this, and she just cannot understand that this is the same Beta. But she puts those thoughts to rest for the mission they're about to embark on. 3 helicopters are what the soldiers station themselves in for the upcoming rise to conflict, and the soldiers that go follow Beta at the forefront as the High Chief and Commander of this mission, with Jadis and 15 soldiers at his helm, with Jadis being obviously the second in command. Alexandria is the first community that the CRM comes across, and the first of their victims and targets. The 3 helicopters station themselves near the community's entrance. 1 stays, while the other 2 find the other communities. The first copter stations itself directly on top of Alexandria's entrance point and just its general field, and bombs it to Kingdom Come. Alexandria is completely and utterly bombed and destroyed. Just like Atlanta, just like Los Angeles. It's bad. This is very bad. It is completely and utterly destroyed, as is every single person there. Except a few. There are survivors. Aaron, for one thing, who lives, but his arm is badly burned, bombed, and crushed amidst the overwhelming chaos. And Gabriel survives too, but just barely. 5 soldiers are stationed in said copter, and they go down to kill any survivors. Because you gotta think, Beta would tell them of the resistance of the communities. So it's expected. But Aaron and Gabriel had fought way worse in the show. And to be honest, it's very surprising that they lived to the end. But they managed to take the soldiers down. Because, come on, it's 5 soldiers and it's Aaron and Gabriel. But Aaron's arm has to be amputated. And thankfully, he is still able to survive the procedure through Gabriel and get his spiky arm, honestly, way later than he did. Now, how is this remotely possible that he got this amidst all this chaos, the burnings, and just so short of time? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. Merle's influence with his arm and everything, and the sword hand, would attract a lot of attention amidst communities who would have replacement arms for those who would lose their appendages. Also, I think that Merle would stretch that influence on himself and apply with Michonne and everything to get replacement backup appendages. So Aaron would ultimately have this on hand way sooner, but he would lose his hand a lot later. So that's kind of funny and ironic. But with this, Aaron and Gabriel know that they have to try and help the other communities, even if the helicopters beat them. The kingdom is next, and Ezekiel sees something from up ahead, a helicopter looming above the kingdom. But by the time that he sees it, it's too late. The helicopter stationed there bombs the kingdom, to utter, complete mayhem. Jerry and Ezekiel are the last two survivors of the kingdom. The 5 soldiers stationed there drop down out of the helicopter, and Jerry knows that how injured they are, it's going to be real hard for him and Ezekiel to take care of this, and one of them or both of them have to survive. But Jerry offers to sacrifice his life to kill the soldiers. And as much as Ezekiel is heartbroken at this, and the fact that he has no one left from his kingdom, he knows that he has to go on. He knows that he has to try and find the other communities and help out and station there before he is either found or the other communities are destroyed. And last but not least, the hilltop is the last victim and circumstance of the CRM. And Gregory, who's alive, hilariously is out there to spectate and ask what the crap is going on before the helicopter station there, the main one, by the way, blows up the hilltop and bombs it to utter destruction. And now, this is where the big and most important moment of the bombings especially, and ultimately the story as of now, comes into play. Because every main character, all the main ones, the important ones, and the big ones are here. And that's who matters in when they get killed. Clara, Martinez, Milton, Schumpert, Alan, Karen and David, Bob, Mika, Ryan, aka Lizzie and Mika's father, Tyrese, Sasha, Zach, Patrick, Beth, Glenn, Pete, Noah, Morales, Jesus, Tara, Alicia, Gregory, Luke, Kelly, Ken, Earl, Tammy, Elijah, and Francis are all killed in the bombings, and the main helicopter drops down with the last 5 soldiers, Jadis, and a fully armed up Beta, part of the CRM. Now, he reveals himself, very surprised that there are survivors, but decides to reveal himself to the survivors, seeing very familiar faces, seeing this as a final scare before they end the communities and the people here once and for all, also for some old payback. And everyone who is alive and knew Beta is utterly terrified, confused, and sad, because how is he alive? And the sad part comes from Andrea and Michonne, and ultimately the scared part too, and Rick and everyone else, because this means that something happened to Merle. Because the whole point of the ending was accepting Merle going after Beta and ending that story. Ending Beta. But here Beta is, but no Merle. And Beta laughs at this, saying that, yes, Merle did find him. And they can all ultimately blame Merle Dixon himself for what has happened to the communities that they have just come across, including this very one here. It's all because of him. As a matter of fact, as a last welcome gift for Beta's return, they can all see Merle one last time, and throws out a walker with half a broken blade on one hand and a deep, deep gash wound through his chest. It's Merle. Merle was killed, but Beta went wild, if you know what I mean. Everyone is heartbroken, but then that heartbreak and sadness turns to utter rage. Andrea, Michonne, Rick, Carl, Judith, RJ, and every single last survivor of the Hilltop community, and everyone who is still alive, that being Aaron, Gabriel, and Ezekiel, who come here, kill off and shoot down Jadis and every one of the last 5 soldiers in an utter rage after seeing what has just happened. Beta grasps his mask and puts it on as a last field to himself to kill off everyone, fully, completely, use the walkers to his advantage, and as a final note, just to end everyone here. But Rick, Michonne, Andrea, RJ, Carl, and Judith won't allow this. And while they're killing off Jadis and all the soldiers, they also turn their eyes squarely on Beta, seeing him as the root for all of what's just happened, and to avenge Merle especially. They shoot Beta down immensely. And once it's all over, no more shots, no more people, Rick tells Andrea specifically that it's her kill. Merle was her lover, and it's only right that Andrea avenges Merle once and for all, ending Beta. But she has to be sure he's actually dead. And once Andrea monologues, "This is for Merle," and everything like that, Beta's one good eye opens, and with his one knife in hand, slashes Andrea's throat, killing her. And this is the end of Andrea after a longer survival than any part of her, obviously, that I've ever covered. But this was also Beta's last mistake. The one character I haven't mentioned until now, the grown-up teenager, DARYL Jr., is also still alive. Seeing his mother and father die straight in front of him, he finishes the job, ends the story, and ultimately ends Beta himself. And with that, DARYL Jr. has killed Beta and ended this spinoff. And so, after DARYL Jr. sees the death of not only his father, but his mother also, he shoots Beta, therefore ending the spin-off's plot of both Merle and Beta, and ultimately putting an end to our story. And how is that, you might ask? Shouldn't the story maybe go on to a CRM war and an ultimate final battle to decide, like, and avenge Merle and Andrea and everyone that they just lost after the bombings? Shouldn't it go on to more than that? Well, not really. Because, for one thing, I feel that Merle, for one thing, dying and then Beta, it was the ultimate closure. And let's face it, with how few people were left in all the communities now, they would be no kind of match against the CRM. And sure, Rick and Michonne are going to be gearing up to fight, like here, at this moment, this pre-recording, against the CRM in the final battle. But I just don't think that they're going to kill all the soldiers, just the 2 of them. And the situation works even with these people in this story. I just don't find it possible, really. And yeah, this is sadly the end of our story. Now, it could go one of 2 ways from here. It could go the direction of Rick and the group just trying to recover, and then the CRM just vanquishing them eventually. Or we could see a Fear crossover, and maybe they could help out with the cause and fight the CRM and somehow maybe win. Or the group after Merle and Andrea's death and DARYL Jr. avenging their deaths by finally taking out Beta, they all go together to the CRM and would either win or lose. It's a real undecided moment, and I feel that you guys could probably, like, collectively come up with a vote for how the final part of the story goes. But all things considered, there really isn't much to talk about. Doing the spinoff or at least one of them, with one of my Walking Dead stories, it was a change. It definitely was a change. And I like how I did it. It's just by the point of Merle ultimately making the ultimate sacrifice and, you know, taking Beta's eye, and then the final war and everything, it just came down to that was the ultimate closure for the group, which is something I wasn't expecting to do. I was expecting to, like, maybe do Merle, like, kill the CRM with Nat, but that idea kind of was brushed aside. I didn't find it right. And this ultimately, I feel, is just the best way to capitalize Merle living instead of DARYL. He would ultimately make a great leader, but by the time that Beta would be around, it just would be too much. And if Merle was the center instead of DARYL, we gotta think that it would be somewhat like this. This is just one of the ways that it really could have, should have, and would have gone. But I hope you guys enjoyed the story nonetheless. The finale for it was good, and the spin-off and everything. Hope you guys enjoyed whatever ending happened and everything. And with that, I'll see you guys soon for What If Vegeta Became Immortal. Stay tuned for that. You guys didn't think this was the end of the video, did you? Well, the Omniverse of Nick has a new feature. A sneak peek at what's next to arrive.